Welcome. Welcome to Bungerville. That's what I like to call it. My name is Nancy Bunger. I came here in 1854. You know what was here when I came here? Nothing. Nothing but grass. And not this grass either. I don't know what this is. There was all grass. As far as you could see, no trees. There was no trees at all. We came out here. I was on the wagon train, the German wagon train out of Illinois. There was I and Steamboat and Dressels and Jaden, a bunch of others. And they came out here. We got here, and we look around and you say, this is it. This is as far as we're going. And so that's where we stayed. Those first few years, they were very difficult. 1856, it started snowing in November. We had 30 inches of snow in November that year. And then it warmed up a little bit, and we got 5 inches of ice on top of the snow. And then the bottom went out of the thermometer, and it went down to 25, 30, some say 40 below zero, and it stayed there for weeks. Oh, it was so cold. We would run out of food, we would run out of fuel. Some family, the Vessel family, laid off a bunch. Everybody but the wife and the son froze to death that year. It was terrible. They say that the pioneers are the ones that took care of all the wildlife, that no more wildlife. That is not true. When we came here, there was deer, there was elk, there was wolf, there was rabbits, there was everything all over the place. After that year, there was nothing. And they still are recovering from that year. That was the same year that the massacre up at Spirit Lake occurred. And that was because the Indians up there, they had no food either. It was just a very bad year. And finally, we got to the point we had to have some fuel. Some people didn't have fire in their houses for 3-4 days at a time. And so a bunch of men got together and they went over to Hardin City to get some wood. And we had a problem. They didn't speak Plattdeutsch. We didn't speak English. They thought we were trying to steal their wood. We thought it was for free. And they got the wagons loaded with wood finally, and they were coming back, and you know what? The horses ran over the snowbanks, but the wagon's wheels broke through, and some of them men almost froze to death trying to get that wood out and back here. It was a very, very difficult year. Well, then after that came the war. And a lot of the men, they wanted to be patriotic to their new country, so they went back east for the war. A lot of them didn't come back. But we kept going and we survived. I went out to Illinois to marry my wife, Tina, and brought her back here. And she was my helpmeet, like it says in the good book. She was my helpmeet, and she was. And we had kinder. We had 5 that lived. We had more than that, but we had 5 that lived. 3 girls and 2 boys. And they helped build up the farm. Well, in 1880 or 1879, they started talking about putting a railroad in. And there was people in Ackley, they were raising taxes up in Ackley. They had 5% tax just to get the railroad to come there. And Nazi got to thinking, why do I want to take all of my grain all the way to Ackley? Why not have it here? So I went and talked to the railroad, the Burlington, Cedar Rapids, and Northern Railroad. I went down there and I talked to them and I say, if you put the railroad in here, I give you 7 acres off of the end of my ground for $1. They took it. They said, okay. So they put the railroad in here, all the way from Holland, all the way up to Howell Falls. No. At Holland over at Grundy, not in the old country. That wouldn't work well. But they put the elevator in, and they ran it up there. And that first year, Lush and Carson and Company, a big real estate outfit from Ackley, they came down and they started an elevator. And it must have been a good thing because, they bought 10,000 bushels of corn that year. They had to put up more cribs and more cribs and more. Every year they had to add more cribs. Well, pretty soon they started the town. They put up, we had a general store, we had a grocery store, and then they named the town Wonderville after Nazi. But some of the people thought I was getting a big head. So they named it Cleves instead, out of like Cleves and over in Westphalia. Only we spell ours with a C and not a K. So we came to, we had creamery, we had a blacksmith shop, we had everything that you could run in the town. And it just continued to grow. We even got our own post office. But we also had some trouble, Well, there was a yoker by the name of Ernie that ran the elevator here years ago. And at one time he put a sign on right out there where that one that says AIS, he had a sign sitting there. It says, "Welcome to Little Chicago." Well, we was like Chicago. We had our own crime wave here. In 1884, there was two brothers come into town that night. Frank and Nate, the range barker, they came into town that night, and they stopped at Gottle's store, and they were getting their groceries, and they got groceries for their hired man's innings, and they were putting things together and whatnot, and when they got all done, Frank said, "I want a bottle of King's Stomach Bitters." Now, he could have gone next door to the saloon and got a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of schnapps or whatever he wanted. But if he got the stomach bitters, he paid for the stomach bitters. If he got a bottle of whiskey, he paid for the whiskey and he paid for the tax. And it was just cheaper to get the stomach bitters. He did not have stomach trouble. They sold a lot of stomach bitters. Little old ladies here, there, and wherever. But they got that when he left. They left and they went out west to visit some other people that night. The next morning, they find Frank's father-in-law was dead down at Gifford. And as they were looking at that, they found a bottle of King's Stomach Bitters in his buggy. And so they say, "Oh, that must have been what they bought that night here." And so they charged him with murder. And they spent 26 years in prison. I don't think they did it. But life goes on. The second crime wave we had, in the 1920s, there was a thing called Prohibition. Well, there would be wagons come into town full of oats to go to the elevator. But before they went to the elevator, they would stop at the saloon, and they would stop at the grocery store, and they would stop here, there, and wherever. And every time they stopped, they'd go over to the wagon, and out would come a bottle of moonshine. And they got rid of a lot of oats that year. That was our second crime wave. The third crime wave, there was a little girl, she's sitting right there, that lived right north of town. And she tells us that at noon that day, it was a warm June day, there was a guy come to the door. He had on a heavy sweater. He come and knock on the door. And her dad goes to the door, and they were talking a bit. And finally, her dad said, "Well, come in and have dinner." That was a custom. If somebody come to your door, "Mama, put on another plate." And they came in, and he sat there, and he was kind of a shifty character. He was looking around all the time. His name was Tommy Carroll. You probably never heard of him. Well, after dinner, he went out and stood on the porch. And pretty soon, this big black car pulls up. Now, in 1934, most cars were big, and most cars were black. So that wasn't anything unusual. There was a lady driving this one. Well, he got in, and away they went. And they didn't think too much more about it until a couple of days later they went to Waterloo. And they got into a service station over there. We used to have a service station here. You know what that was? It wasn't like self-service, no. And when they got there, the guy came out, and while he was filling the tank, he checked the oil, he checked the water, he checked the tires, he checked over the whole car, washed the windshields. And while he was doing that, he found a whole stack of license plates in that car. And he thought that was a little funny. So after they left, he called the police. And he told the police, and they said, yeah, they thought that was kind of funny too. So they started watching for the car. Well, they didn't have much to watch because they went from there, they went down to the bar right across the street from the police station. And they went in to drink. Or they went in. Well, when they came out, the cops are waiting. And the cops say, halt! You is under arrest. And Tommy Carroll said, oh. And he reached under this heavy sweater, and he pulls out a gun. He said, the hell I am. And he pulled that gun out. And the cops didn't really have anything to do with that. And one of them was standing close enough, and he clapped him on the jaw, knocked him down. He dropped his gun. He got up and ran. And boom, they shot him. He died a day or two later, but they find out that he had just helped his boss rob a bank up in Mason City. A guy by the name of Dillinger. You ever heard of him? That was the third crime wave. The fourth crime wave, about 1969. A guy by the name of Wardicus was running the general or the store here then, and he got in. They were getting ready for bed that night. It was a warm night, and it was June, and he was just getting ready for bed, and he hears a pop. He goes, what is that? Pop, pop. And he thought somebody was shooting at the house, and pretty soon, it was like a machine gun. Well, they had just put that new bin up down there, that far bin. They just put that up. Had 70,000 bushels of corn in it. They just filled it. Well, one of the bolts said, oh, I'm tired. The head popped off. And it hit the house. And the other one said, well, that's like a good idea, so it popped off. And pretty soon, all them bolts and the corn came out, and the thing came down, and the corn came out the top. 70,000 bushels of corn on the ground. What are we going to do? Well, this guy by the name of Ernie, what are we going to do now? Well, you know what? All the farmers from around, they got together their shovels, their scoops, their buckets, whatever they could bring, and they come into town, and they started cleaning that up, and the brooms, and they got that all cleaned up before it got rained on. Now, it probably, if it would have happened in Chicago, or if it would have happened in New York City, they probably could have got it cleaned up. But I don't think all the corn probably would have gone back to the elevator there. It might have gone someplace else. So Cleves has a wonderful memory. But the store closed in '69. 44 years ago yesterday was the last day that the post office was open. And we've had repair shops come and go, and the clean rate closed. We still have a bank, and we still have a elevator. That elevator down through the years has been run by Cruises. Had it in the 50s and 60s and 70s. You can still see it says Cruise up on the top of the elevator there. Froning ran it for a while. Ben Jaspers from Steamboat run it for a while. There was a number of men that ran that, and now it was sold. First, it was Ernie sold it to United Suppliers, and then they sold it to Innovative Ag, and they have elevators all over the place. So I think the elevator, it continues to go here for some time anyway. You know, Ernie, if you was a kid and you came into the elevator with your father, he was always giving away porcupine eggs. People would come in and, here, you have a porcupine egg. And the father would say, no, 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 no. he didn't want any more cockleburs at home than we had. But Ernie was always good for Dad. There was a number of things. He had 3 cobs hanging on the wall. And it says you go to the outhouse, there was a red cob, a white cob, and a red cob. You use the red cob to see if you use the red cob, and then you use the white cob to see if you need to use the last red cob. So he was always had some kind of joke like that going on down there. But Cleves is slowly going away. Although we started a church, it's still going strong up northeast here, Ostfriesland. If you want to come back to Cleves to visit, feel free. Everybody would be glad to help you. If you want to visit me, well, I'm up in that yard west of the church up there. That's where I spend my time now. We're glad to have you here this morning. I think you're going on to Robertson now. That's just up the rail line. Unfortunately, the rail line isn't here anymore. But I think the bus driver can find you there. I'm glad to have you. Guten Abend.